All right, how's it going, guys? Thank you again for joining us for episode 3 of our SA Schools Strength and Conditioning Forum. The first 2 editions have been really cool. We've discussed the challenges in the industry. We were lucky enough to have Andy Edwards on board for episode 2. And I think, it's been a great success so far. And we look forward to unpacking a lot more sort of pertinent issues and topics that are directly related to our industry. So I'd like to say thank you to our associates. We have LifeMax and Harvest Table who have helped us make these webinars possible. In terms of LifeMax, they have we've showcased a couple of their products over the course of the last 2 webinars. And today we are going to show you a short 1-minute video on their GymAware software. So basically it is linked to velocity-based training, and it is something that we're going to be discussing in the coming months. So I'm just going to play you a quick video from LifeMax. If you guys are interested in chatting to them about this product, then you can either get in touch with me or I'll put you in touch with Graham from LifeMax. So let me just get this video set up. Can you guys see the video? Yeah, here we go. Oh, hold on. Sorry about that. So that is the GymAware velocity-based product from LifeMax. If you guys are interested, then just give me a shout or I'll put you in touch with Graham. So without further ado, guys, I wanted to chat about a topic that is quite close to my heart, and that is building a strength exercise index for high school athletes. So I've put together a presentation. Mine is a little bit more practical in terms of content. Jared does have a presentation that he's put together. He's having a few technical issues with getting it sorted. His is a little bit more linked to the research around long-term athletic development. But let's get cracking on mine, and then we will see how we go with Jared's thereafter. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, guys. So building a strength exercise index for high school athletes. So we've chatted about this topic briefly on the group, but I wanted to explain a little bit about how and why I go about it. It's a system that I've developed over the last sort of 6 to 8 years at Westville Boys and Durban High School. It's generally, we look at trying to introduce this in grade 8, and then obviously preparing an athlete when they get to grade 10, grade 11, and they start working with barbells. So yeah, the considerations with regards to putting together a strength training index. Obviously, a big thing is pressure for results. I found that there's always pressure for results, especially at school. The way schools are going at the moment, there's a lot of competition. There's always going to be pressure for results. At the same time, you want to develop an athlete in such a way that that we're not burning them out, we're not exposing them to certain things too early. And yeah, it is quite a fine line between getting it right, but I think experience, using a bit of creativity, experimenting, you refine your technique as you go. Obviously, important for me as well is building a love for the conditioning culture. If you get the kids into it, you get them enjoying what you're doing, really get them excited to come down to the gym. And I think that gets them going and it prepares them, for 5 years of fun, as opposed to everything being a bit of a struggle. What level are your athletes at? Obviously, an index in terms of the exercise you're choosing, you have to be adaptable and on the spot. This is sometimes you'll be working with 50 to 60 athletes at a time, and I think it is one of the most challenging environments. So on the spot, you may have to progress or regress a different type of exercise, and it's just really good to have some kind of consistency in what you deliver. The link to long-term athletic development model factors. Obviously, 12 to 15-year-old kids are sort of in that level 4 training to train phase. It is obviously very important here to consider load management. So not putting too much on them, introducing to stimuli, but not creating burnout in a phase where they sort of, their body's developing. And I think it's very important just to pay attention to not overload them. What resources do you have available? Obviously, in terms of equipment, some gyms are state of the art in terms of the schooling environment. Some guys are a little bit more limited. Some schools only have access to the gym for the seniors. So there's a variety of different ways to look at it. And obviously, equipment, depending on what you have, that is a big factor. Time is quite important. Sometimes we only have 1 to 2 sessions a week with our teams. And prioritizing is really, really important. And then the last one, in terms of considerations, how does your index sort of link into your philosophy? And I think there's a very fine line between doing the basics really well and introducing some more complex and challenging stimuli. I think as you go, you build experience and yeah, you know sort of when to keep it simple and when to spice it up a bit. In terms of practical applications, with regards to testing, in stuff like squat tests for juniors, push-up tests, and say, for example, a pull test with a TRX inverted row, I like to use a metronome with a set percentage of body weight. I think it's quite effective in terms of being safe. And we can chat about that a little bit further once we get the conversation going. What equipment is appropriate and caters for numbers? I like using kettlebells, sandbags, your TRXs, your bands, your slam balls. There's so much you can do with those kind of equipment before you head onto barbells, and I just think that learning as you're going. Trying different things with these types of equipment is definitely a good exercise in terms of building your philosophy. Your loading patterns, obviously there's you can go circuit style, different types of rep ranges, time-based depending on the numbers. Again, this is something that comes with experience. Introducing velocity-based movements, so a bit of plyometric stuff. Obviously, safety is paramount, especially with grade 8s and 9s. And then obviously you have to pay attention to the dosage. All right, in terms of the way that I structure my movements, okay, this is not rocket science. I like to use a push-pull, both horizontal and vertical. Your squatting movement, knee dominance, your hip hinge. I like to incorporate some unilateral work, obviously with your hip, knee, and ankle, incorporating a bit of proprioception. When you're running, you're obviously generally on one leg, and I think it is practical to incorporate some unilateral work. Loaded carries, my absolute favorite. There's a wide variety that you can use to challenge the body, and definitely a good option to incorporate in your strength index in terms of a well-rounded athlete. And obviously you've got your different your core variations, which we'll discuss later, and then some additional tools depending on the equipment you have in your gym. So moving on to our knee dominant. Okay, knee dominant. So I like to classify my movements into a sort of basic exercise, 3 intermediates and 3 advanced. So in all my progressions, I have 3 sort of go-tos. Say, for example, you have a grade 8 who comes to you, his form is really poor. You're going to give him exercises sort of in the basic range. Once he gets to a certain level where, you know, he can do 10 to 15 really good reps with low load, then you can look at sort of progressing along that continuum. So I'm not going to spend too much time on going through each exercise, but the point here is just to see the different progressions, the different stimuli, and how you can progress in terms of building an athlete, especially in the junior years. In terms of the hip dominant work, we look at incorporating some bands in the banded hip extensions, some isometric work with the glute bridges, and then again, you can build it up to using the barbell, kettlebell swings, and then obviously a little bit more complex lifts in the advanced category. Unilateral work. Okay, so obviously your basics, your split squats, some proprioceptive stuff for the airplanes, sort of some stuff in the frontal plane. I'll go across to your pushing, obviously your horizontal and vertical integration. You've got your band punches. Obviously, those are a little bit less difficult than sort of moving onto a barbell straight away, but I like the balance of using bands, your time and attention, your different push-up variations, tire pushing, obviously moving onto your barbell, and then your little bit more advanced stuff at the bottom. You're pulling, you've got the concept rower. I really like a TRX inverted row, especially for juniors. You can, you know, if they get to sort of 10 to 12 reps with good form, you can look at putting, say, like a 10-kilo plate on their chest and build it up that way. I find that's one of my go-tos, especially with the juniors. Yeah, you've got your gorilla rows, a bit of unilateral pull work, and then a little bit more on the functional side. You've got your TRX lead pulls at the bottom. Core, obviously you're looking at your different types of movements, your isometric stuff, your concentric work, and then your stability stuff. You got your plank variations, nice and basic. Working onto your Palloffs, looking at your sort of lateral stabilities. And then at the bottom, stuff like your Swiss ball pot stirs, which I really like. I find that gets really good activation. But I think the important thing here is to find what works for you, how you can easily progress and regress. And yeah, this is what I've got for my core. Loaded carries, I really love these. Obviously, got your basic farmer's walk. You can work into your different offset stuff, your overheads, which are really nice and taxing on the midline, and then sort of some overhead stability stuff as we go. So, as I said, the point of this is just to show you guys my framework and what you guys need to think about in terms of building your own framework and sort of adapting it as you go. Just some quick take-home points. Know your progressions and regressions on point. You have to be adaptable. If a guy's struggling, how to pull him back. If a guy streaks ahead, how to sort of push him along and keep challenging him. Don't ever be scared to be creative. Don't be scared to give things a try. Always teach the why early. If they know how it's going to link to their sport, I think that, that is a really important thing with building your buy-in. Be consistent in your cue terminology, especially with the grade 8s and 9s. Be consistent with that. And then creating a competitive environment with all these different exercises, I think, is a great thing. So, that's it from me. Jared, have you managed to have any luck there?
I think I have, Bruce. So let me just give this a bash. I think we're on track.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Right. So we all sorted. Can you see the screen? All right. Cool. So I'll just take you guys through this very, very, very quickly. Thanks again, Myles, for the opportunity. And I hope that we could all take a little bit of information away from this, or hopefully through kind of conversation, I can maybe learn some more from you guys. So I'll basically be talking about the strength conditioning again for youth student athletes, and the reason I have it in brackets is there comes that decision whether we are looking at are we looking at a student first, or are we looking at an athlete first? And being an S&C forum and an S&C discussion, we'll address from an athlete perspective. But I think obviously bearing in the back of your mind that these are students that do have extreme workloads through the class and cultural activities and extramural. So we need to kind of look at them from a holistic perspective. So I guess the idea would be, are we looking at short-term gain in our programs, or are we looking at a long-term goal? So I guess, Myles has got a very, very good structure that he's using at Redhill. But for anybody that's new into the S&C environment or into a school environment like me, I've been here for 4 months, coming from a different environment. The question is always, where do we start? And I guess there's a lot of different considerations, a lot of different factors that we need to take into consideration that vary, from student to student, from environment to environment, from school to school. Anything ranging from chronological age to intellectual ability. Myles mentioned resources, time. A big one that I've encountered recently is the school, the coach, and the parent expectation of the athlete. I think that's also really important to bear in mind. To paint everyone with one brush, I guess, is a discussion whether you should do that or not. So just something very, very funny that I thought of when we look at developing athletes, especially within the student population or the youth population. Do we look more for movement competency, or do we look for athletic performance? And historically, I think it's probably veered towards the latter, where somebody said, it's rugby season, we get the guys nice and big and strong, and they must compete. But every school is different. So coming from St. John's, every student is required to participate in a sport over the 3 terms. And that's not going to be the same sport. So, we had a student the other day who said, I play rugby, can't I just do gym the other 2 terms? And no, you can't. You actually need to participate, you need to grow as an athlete. But again, how do we find a fundamental annual program where we can make the students more competitive across all the sporting spheres? And for me, that's more movement competency than immediate short-term athletic performance. So when we look at a little bit of the research just out there in athletic performance and populations, and we look at the benefits of strength training or strength conditioning and physical ability, there are a number of different papers that have more or less recently been published, kind of from 2020 onwards. They deal with optimizing health. They look at, again, health relations in youth and strength conditioning, holistic development, education, motor skill competencies, psychological attributes. And the one which I want to mention just very quickly is developing this motor competency in youths. And this was a paper that was done, I think it was about 80 plus S&Cs that had to have worked within a school environment for more than three or 5 years. And they basically did this web-based questionnaire on certain aspects. So we're going to look at that very, very, very quickly. And just some of the interesting things that we've pulled up, and Myles mentioned a lot of it. All right. So part of this questionnaire, there were different factors, but part of it was looking at what are the 10 most frequent physical movements that these SNCs or these 80 plus SNCs thought were vital, and what are the 10 least frequent movement competencies? And it's really interesting that hip hinge, lunge, squat, upper body vertical pulling, jumping horizontally and vertically, upper body vertical pushing, hip hinge, hip mobility, and upper body horizontal pulling. These were issues or movements that these SNCs working in schools felt were most prevalent, as opposed to historically where physical education used to be about, can you do a handstand? Can you roll? Can you jump? Are those really important at certain phases of physical development? 100%. But dealing with a more athletic population, where we're looking at physical development in a competitive environment, we obviously know that the upper more frequently developed competencies were vital. And I think, again, Myles mentioned a lot of those in his program. So just interestingly, another point that they talked about was the frequency of sessions that they worked on. Again, it varies from school to school. So a school that's maybe less sporting inclined will maybe do 1 weekly session, and a school that's very sporting inclined and maybe less academically forceful, if you can put it that way, would be doing more than 4 sessions a week. For me, we're sitting somewhere in the middle there with 2 sessions per week in season. Obviously, we have to try and contend with 2 sporting sessions and competition over the weekend. So it might be very different for your school. And then again, the average S&C session. So we try to make ours a little bit more compact, very much in line with this 46 to 59-minute sessions. We want the students to get in and get out and go home and enjoy their time with their families, their mates, relax, do their homework, whatever it might be that they want to try and do to get through the week. So I'm sure we've all seen these 2 tables before, looking at long-term athletic development, both for male and female sexes. It's pretty straightforward. It's research backed. It's been cited a number of times in papers over the years. But my question kind of always comes down to, when we look at LTAD or long-term development, is it a streamlined pathway or is it a generic focus? So do these present generic ideas? You know, if we're talking about a 12-year-old, we're talking about somewhere between sampling and recreational years, but what does it actually mean? It's a great guideline, but how do we actually find this pathway of how we develop our athletes in our schooling environment a little bit more accurately? So there have been a number of different models that have come out talking about sport specific. So for example, this table on the left-hand side is for Gaelic football. They're talking about our 3 different phases between pre-peak height velocity, our mid-peak height velocity, how we're adjusting the training, and obviously post-height velocity, how we're then implementing more load on the student athletes. And then interestingly, this athletic motor skills competencies that was brought out, I think, from the States, very similarly looking at different upper body and lower body movement competencies, athletic competencies, accelerations, decelerations, landing, rebound mechanics. These are all attributes that we can't necessarily forget about when we're developing a gym-based S&C program. Do these come a lot? Are they drawn more from their sport? 100%. But when we're looking at what students may be lacking within their sporting success, what they need from a sporting development perspective, can we incorporate that into the gym environment or through one-on-one sessions? 100% we can. So I'll run you through a little bit through our LTDA AD profiling at St. John's. It's a little bit different maybe to what other schools are doing. Coming from my previous environment, I think this is a really important aspect to consider, especially if you have a large school. If you have maybe a smaller school and you're focusing more on smaller groups and smaller age groups with sporting codes, I think it might differ for you. So very quickly with St. John's, we need to take a very big multifactorial training approach. So we've got 14 different sporting codes. We've got 3 terms across the year. We've got 700 plus students just within the college. That's excluding the prep and the pre-prep and the bridge, which is like a pre-prep. Every student, as I mentioned, has to do sport compulsory throughout the year. And then we have various age groups and levels of ability within those different age groups. So it is quite a dynamic program, dynamic group, and staying on top of it, I think, is really important. So looking at our main sporting groups, anything from rugby to chess, some of us might say, is chess a sport? And it is definitely. A big thing for me is how do we look at all these different sporting codes and what is a fundamental key feature that I think that they have? And a big thing for me is that if you look at all the different sporting codes, sorry, I see a bit frozen on my side. There we go. Sorry. So a big aspect that we all have in common across all the different sporting codes, right, is that they all have a strength component. Anywhere from rugby to chess. Chess, if we start talking about postural control and concentration, cognitive function, it's there. Strong core, strong respiratory muscles will help a chess player stay a little bit more focused and in control compared to rugby player, where we know strength is a foundational aspect that they need. So we basically, what we did at St. John's is we've tried to develop over the last 3 months the central database. How that works is we've created a shared Google sheet that's shared between the coaches, S&Cs, and MICs for the different sports. So they all have access to the central master sheet. And then that's broken up into tabs of the different sports. And we basically fill those tabs in the central master sheet with testing data that's either drawn from our sports specific testing or our sport block testing within the term, where we'll focus predominantly on upper body, lower body strength. And then we'll also look at explosive power from a lower body and upper body perspective. We also have set PE blocks within the 2-week cycle. Within that base, what we'll do is when we have a grade block, so 120 kids, we'll focus a lot on our 10 meter, 20 meter, 30 meter speed development or speed baselines. We'll do a yo-yo through an IR1, or we'll look at a bit of change of direction through a 505. And that's to create baselines for every student, no matter what sport they play, holistically across the entire year. And then we'll retest based on whatever their program might be working on. Through this testing and this data, we can then work on physical profiles. With the data from our testing, for example, we'll work on upper body and lower body strength profiles, strength to weight ratios. We'll know where they are in relation to their sport. So we know the rugby players maybe need to be about 1.5 when it comes to a lower body strength to weight ratio. We know they might need to be above 1, for example. That's a good baseline. And then how do we improve that over time? And then again, within that physical profile, we can then work on an annual program and look at their macro cycle. And we look at non-linear periodization. We look at individual needs. If we have to dial the load down, Milo mentioned that quite a bit. If we have to dial the load down because they're struggling with exam prep or exam load, whether they're struggling a little bit through their wellness questionnaires, which we run with some of the sporting codes, we'll then adjust their actual physical load. So just to the nuts and bolts, the nitty gritty, Milo mentioned a lot of his work in terms of focusing on movements. We focus on 7 fundamental movement patterns in what we call our long-term physical competency pathway, or our PCP. So we focus on our squat, our hinge, our lunge, push and pull, our brace or anti-rotation, and our rotation movements. And you'll generally find that whatever exercise you want to pull out, or any sporting movement that you want to pull out, they'll generally share either 1, 2, or 3 of these different movement patterns. So, for example, a rugby player, if you have somebody that's over the ball trying to steal, he's generally going to be doing a mix of bracing, he's going to be hinging, and he's going to be doing a bit of a pull, upper body pull. So how do we try and get that into our fundamental movement patterns? Where do we start with that, and how do we progress? So this is our current framework. This goes from what we would call grade 6. St. John's is a little bit old school in terms of how we name grades, from upper 3 removes, lower 4, upper 4, lower 5, and upper 5. But it's basically grade 6, grade 7, grade 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So you'll see if we move from the right-hand side all the way across to the left, we're starting with as much simple movement, body weight where we can, loaded where we can, and how we then progress that onward. So you'll see that, for example, here we use in the removes for the grade 8s, we'll be using a lot of kettlebell work, a lot of core rotationary work. But as we start moving into our grade 9s and 10s, that's an area we want to focus a lot on. We want to focus a lot on strength development, make sure the entire grade is nice and strong. So whatever sport they're participating in, their injury risk is lower, they're able to perform a little bit better in their sport. And then as they're moving into their grade 11 and 12 year, we'll call that our elite group. So that's generally going to be student athletes in the next few years if we get this right. They're going to be nice and strong, athletically competent. and able to bridge the gap a little bit better between high school and semi-professional or university sports. There's not going to be so much of a gap. And we don't want to focus solely on grade 11s and matrics. We want to make sure that those grade 7s that are coming through into the college are fundamentally have good movement mechanics. So we also focus a lot on our strength stability foundation, our first 2 years, grade 7, grade 8. 9 and 10 is more loaded movement prep. And then obviously our last 2 years, we were looking at more chaotic power work, rate of force development, making sure the guys are as explosive and strong as possible. So just to finish off, like I said, the structure of St. John's is very different to other schools. We have the bridge, which is generally going to be from our 3-year-olds coming through to our pre-prep, which is generally going to be 5 to 8. Our prep school is going to be anywhere from age 9 to 13, and then our college is running from 14 to 18. And we've basically engaged with discussions with our director of sport in the pre-prep and the bridge to try, and they do a lot of movement fundamentals there, but we want to try and create a syllabus from our bridge pre-prep phase through our prep phase into our college. So by the time the student athletes are entering into the college, their foundation is solid, the foundation is there, we can really get to the nuts and bolts of athletic development early on as safely as possible and within reason. But we're going to try and focus on developing the students as quickly as possible. And very interestingly, if you get something like this right, you're looking at a 15-year development potential. And if you think about an Olympic cycle, even if a pro athlete runs through 2 Olympics, it's 8 years of development at the highest level. If we get this right over 15 years of development in a structured syllabus, hopefully St. John's will be developing a lot of student athletes that are able to compete with some of the bigger schools and more sporting inclined schools. And you know, maybe over time we'll be developing a little bit more national scheme players. But it's an idea that I've kind of worked on over the last 3 or 4 months, my time at the college. And yeah, it's a little bit different from what everyone else might be doing. But yeah, open to questions and to see what everybody thinks. Sorry, I think you're still muted there.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. That was really awesome. And I think it's really impressive to see how much time and effort and thought you put into coming out of the pro environment into the setting. And I think you've really got a really, really, really good structure going. So yeah, well done for that. Guys, yeah, so what I would like now is, yeah, we want to hear people's thoughts, opinions. I think let's start with what Jared said. Has anyone got some insight into or some comments on what Jared's just gone over? Maybe just yeah, either put it in the chat or just fire away. Has anyone got any questions on any of that, guys? Just give guys a second to respond. Mark, do you have something you wanted to mention there?
If you can hear me properly.
Yeah, you good?
So just I mentioned it, but like I say, it might not be exactly relevant to what's happening now. But just out of curiosity, like I say, for you, and I think this is Jared. Sorry, I can't remember the name. Terrible at names. Like I say, my question was, I'm obviously at a primary school. I'm at Redhill Heights, and I run the conditioning there. The one question I had was, what would you like to see more in terms of preparation and movement patterns and things like that being done and implemented more at primary schools, that will not only set up the foundation blocks and stages for kids going into high school next year, but at the same time would benefit the primary schools. So, for example, if you, let's say, Myles, let's say I was training you, brother, and I'm trying to set up your basic movements, your foundation, everything, kind of prepping you for a high school. But at the same time, while I'm prepping you for that, I'm getting benefits of that as well with you being on the field.
Marcus, was that directed towards from what Jared said?
Yeah, because just looking at that, I mean, it's phenomenal with both your guys' presentations. Like, you can just see the wealth of knowledge you guys have, and you obviously are on the money for both your guys' kind of setups. And like I say, it's just nice to kind of, if you were in my position, or like I say, what would you want to see? Like if you came down for 2 weeks to come and just have a look at how things are run. Like I said, what would the specific movements or core exercises or whatever it may be that you would want to see being implemented at primary school level, that it's going to be benefiting the kids in the future when they get to the high school levels. But at the same time, I'm also getting a bit of a reward for it in terms of them and their performance on the fields on the weekends and stuff like that.
Mark, yeah, so from my perspective, I think just the basic fundamental move patterns without loading, teach them how to squat, get the knees in line, get them sitting into the squat, in terms of hinging, back straight, bum back, chest down, chest up, in terms of your pushing movements, you know, getting your elbows in the right position, you know, getting your brace, with your pull movements, engaging your sort of force couples, teaching good posture, jumping, landing, all the mechanics around that. I think keeping it simple, especially at primary school level, is key. Yeah, simple as that. Jared, I don't know if you wanted to touch base on what Mark said there as well. I think you're on mute.
There we go. Fine for me. Right. So thanks, Mark. Good question. So my advice is, if you look at the long-term development plan or long-term development cycle for yourself, where do you see a lot of your students going within their sport and career, or do you just see them being long-term active? And for me, teaching the fundamentals early on when it comes to movement is important. So again, looking at those different movements, how are you going to try and educate them to making sure that maybe they have correct form if you're going to progress the form. So for example, if you look at a Romanian deadlift, there's I think it's about 7 different variations that you can work on. And so you're talking probably a lot more advanced levels. But if you get your fundamental movements and understanding with those every student done early on, it makes life for them a lot easier when they're going to a high school varsity pro environment later on. So like Myles said, get the foundations done right, make sure that they are competent, but make sure they also understand what they're doing and how they're doing it. I think that's really important. So Myles, now to see a question from Brian with regards to movement and conditioning, and if that's left to the sporting coaches. So Brian, the answer to your question is no. My programs do focus a lot on strength and power, depending on where the students or student athletes are currently. There is a conditioning block involved in each of the days of their programs, but because we only have access to them within the gym environment 2 days a week, we need to make sure that it's strength-based and that the understanding of their movement competency is rock solid. When it comes to their sport and practice, there's always room for doing conditioning work within that. or if they're on a special program where we know that there's a student athlete who's come back from injury, or they require some extra work when it comes to conditioning or physiological development, then 100% that individual program will kick in. But maybe I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Marcus, does that answer your question?
That's on the money. Yeah, 100% shot for that, guys. Yeah, because obviously being in a primary school is a hell of a lot different to high school when you kind of get these big kids, and obviously once you've created your foundation and your stability is in place, as you were talking about, you implement the barbells and things like that. I just remembered being when I was at Westall with you guys and just kind of always noticing, especially like for the first term when we had our grade 8s, that was hugely missing, that basic foundation, from a plank to a squat to a push-up. Those kids, that they would do it, but straight away, as you say, you notice that their form is absolutely out the window. So I just want to make sure that if I can always contribute and add value and make life easier, because I know quite a few of our boys are going to Westall, knowing that I can make life easier for them for that transition going there, by implementing these things and being strict on their movement patterns, then I'm happy as Larry. Yeah.
Cool. And then Brian, so sorry, I know Jared, he responded to your question. I just wanted to see, do you want to elaborate on Jared's answer to your question?
Look, I can't say much because Jared is coming from his position and what he's doing currently at St. John's. But what I currently do, I also incorporate conditioning, and I also incorporate what I call movement. Because one thing, I once got a chance where I was working with high-profile athletes. I noticed there was a little bit of some gap. Guys who failed to develop what I started to term sports development movements were unable to perform at their best later on in life. Look, I just mentioned, say, sports development movements. I started to sort of differentiate between the fundamental movements and what I call sports development movements. For example, we talk of squat, deadlift as fundamental movements. Then I've come up with a term to say sports development, where I mention things like translation, linear translation, rotational translation, what else, like broad jumps, triple extension. For example, I had a chance to work with Olympian guys who struggled off the blocks in terms of fully having that triple extension, because I think it was a missing already on their earlier stages of development. So yes, I was asking this question because most of the times I've seen most schools whereby the sports coaches, they'll make the guys run forever, which most of the time as strength and conditioning coaches, we don't believe that approach. Let me say, I don't believe in that approach. I'm a little bit of with a different approach, And then also I think my answer, if you really understood very well, I think that I think it would be also important to mark, to first develop the fundamental movements, and then also try to tap on the sports development movement. I think there's a guy called David F. Stoden. He really talks a lot about these sports development. I'm pretty sure he uses a different term for it. He's a good guy to look up for.
Cool. Yeah. So I think this specific talk was linked around building your sort of strength index. Obviously, there are other fitness components that we do focus on. Obviously, yeah. Today we are focusing on the strength. So the conditioning aspect, I think we will get to in the near future. There's a lot of topics that we still want to uncover. So I think there's a couple of guys from other schools. Is there anyone else who wants to sort of chat about possible similarities and contrasts that they have in terms of the way they put together their strength programs at the schools? I see there's Sebenza and Rogues there from Westville. I see there's Lawrence from St. Andrews. Do you guys have any comments or sort of contrasts or similarities that you want to chat about with regards to how you guys do things? Who's talking? Benz, is that you guys? Is that you? I don't know what's going on here. Yeah, guys, is there anyone from any of the other schools you want to make comments there on how they do things at their school? Rogues?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Sorry, bro. Let me just shut my door so I don't get any disturbances. Yeah. So, bro, obviously you had a lot of influence in the way we kind of implemented our initial structures. Probably about 5-6 years ago, and I mean we kind of still in alignment with those, barring like one or two small changes. Obviously Sebenza's come in and he's added his input and approach, which is a new, fresh kind of way of thinking. But I think for the most part we kind of pretty much right up the same alley, I suppose. We have our like favored 5 to 7 movements, like a squat, hinge, push, pull, carry. We do also put quite a big emphasis on the different forms of conditioning. Obviously, like Jared mentioned earlier, whether it's strength and power, depending on where the athlete is in relation to their season. We also obviously have our focuses in terms of conditioning as in relation to their season, obviously, whether aerobic, anaerobic, their SAQ, speed, whatever. So, I mean, I think for the most part, we pretty much kind of agree with everything that's been said. I don't know if Benz wants to add input from his side. Benz is working more, obviously, with when you're talking about rugby in particular, Benz will be working with the senior buggers, the opens group, first team, kind of second team squad at the moment that are going into preseason, and I'm more with the juniors on their developmental kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know if he wants to maybe speak a bit. I don't know if he's still on here. No, he's jumped off.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that, Rogues, for giving your take on what's happening at Westville. I think so, guys. If there's no one else who wants to sort of chat about how things are going at their school, what I'm going to do is obviously I will make this available for guys to review and see the different things that we've put up. And then I will look at, sorry, Jason, you there?
How's it? Can you hear me?
Yes, go for it, bud.
How's it? Hi, everyone. I'm at Hilton College up in the Midlands, or down in the Midlands for some of you, I guess. Yeah, I generally I don't like talking too much, so just please forgive me. But yeah, it's interesting. You know, we I think it was Brian, or however you pronounce spelled a bit differently to Brian, but you mentioned functional movement, or I don't know, functional is sometimes a bit of a taboo term. Movement versus strength. So, and this wasn't my doing, I just happened upon it. An under 15 boy doing 120 kg squat, test him for standing broad jump, can't land. He can't stick a broad jump. So that's the kind of stuff that that I think at least I've come across a few times. This is fairly recent. But yeah, so like for me, he's clearly a very strong boy, but I just said to him, like, I'd rather be able to jump and do a single leg hop, rather than do 120 kg squat as a 15-year-old. So yeah, just I would say a bit of an anecdote, about that in relation to these kids developing. And obviously we're all boarding. So I think, I'm not sure if anyone here has got that other than Lawrence, perhaps has got like 90% boarding. So we've obviously got our guys who are like, I don't know if they're like, I'm not from Joburg, but like the four ways butts who, they flipping just buys and tries and chest all day. And because our gym is their gym, so we're in a weird space in terms of trying to manage what happens there. And there's very much a bit of a butt culture about gymming, and the Oaks, get their stuff from, I don't know, T Nation or whatever, and they run with it, and they're not letting go. And it's a bit of a cyclical problem that we're trying to convince these Oaks this isn't the way. But because the seniors do it or have done it in the past, it's this thing the juniors want to do it. So it's really about breaking that cycle for us at this point. And yeah, I mean, it's probably my biggest headache at the moment is just trying to convince Oaks that they don't need to train like bodybuilders. And I'm sure a lot of you have encountered that as well. But yeah, so I mean, I guess my thinking is very similar to a lot of what's been said here in terms of having a plan and working through something, but sure, the implementation is uphill there. It's an uphill battle of note.
Yeah, Jason, I'm telling you, we've all dealt with those Oaks. They're 14 years old, 15-year-olds, and they're questioning your methods. Sir, when are we going to get big? And for me, an example is, I'll see an Oak, I'll catch a guy doing a quick sets of bicycles, and I'll be like, but I'll reward you with your sets of bicycles when you can do 20 consecutive chin-ups. You know what I mean? They want to do these sort of isolated movements, but I guarantee you probably the guy will probably not even be able to do sort of 7 or 8 of those chin-ups. So yeah, the struggle is real. I can definitely resonate with that.
So, sorry, Rogues, I know you want to jump in there as well. If you guys don't mind, I was going to have a closing point to Jason, and if you don't mind, I need to run off.
No.
So when I started the college, the first thing I thought was, what are the existing structures in place? What are my predecessor and the team? So there's 3 of us working and a gym manager in the HBC environment. What are the programs in place, and how do we work on what we want to achieve, and how do we drive that? And luckily for us, our sports department is very, very close knit. So the director of sport has a firm philosophy how the training should happen, and all the sports or the coaches, head coaches, should I say, or MICs, are at a very high level. So when we went in there, we solved the idea of what we want to try and achieve with the coaches, and then from that it was pushed down. So we do have the odd student now that he goes and he trains at Virgin Active with the personal trainer, and then you hear, what program are you doing? No, it's chest and back today, sir. You know what I mean? So you do have that. But we basically, because we test every sport, and I've tried to ensure that in week 1, I sat down with every coach to make sure that we had a testing block coming up for the elitist group. And we did a testing block, and from that date, we worked on individualized programs for everybody. And then that was then mandated down into the squads to make sure that they follow these individual programs. And then that's how we kind of started to change the culture a little bit about, we are people that you can trust. We are people that you can believe in terms of, I give you a program, you will get stronger. And then we retest. Well, the plan is now 7 weeks into the first program, we retest again. And then the buy-in is, you will be stronger, you will be more athletically capable, and you'll see a transference into your sport naturally. And once that happens, you've kind of sold them on the magic pill, and then there you have kind of cultural buy-in. But without that, I think without trying to change that mindset, it's going to be a struggle, not just now, but in 5 years' time or beyond. So, sorry, everybody, if you don't mind, I just need to try and run off. But if any questions, you're welcome to send me a message, or we can chat on the group more.
Cool.
All right. Marlo, thanks again.
Guys, thanks so much for joining. I think we've had some really sort of content.
Can I catch Rogan then?
Hello?
Sure, Jason. Thank you. Sorry, Marla, I just had a little point to add. Also
Sure.
to Jared's point, a lot of the time, the trust element is a big factor. They think, oh, strength and conditioning coach is a little bit different to a personal trainer, which obviously it is. But they think personal trainer, Virgin Active, butt, arms, chest and back session, not push pull session kind of thing. And I think that buy-in often comes in when they start to notice the results. So when you have your testing kind of when you get those testing results and then you continue with your phase, whether it's hypertrophy or strength or whatever, and then in your next testing batch they see an improvement or they see a change in results. I think that's only when the buy-in starts to kind of happen at times. And I mean, whether that's 8 weeks, 12 weeks, or however long your phases are, your gaps between your testing, I think that's obviously that depends on every coach and every kind of preseason, the way it's structured. But and then in addition to what you said, it was actually kind of funny. Earlier today I had that exact thing with the under 14 rugger buggers going into under 15 next year. Like, so when are we going to start using the bars? I'm like, what do you mean? But you're using a bar now to do an inverted row, like a little cheeky bite back, because I knew what he was trying to ask me. But it's one of those things. It's like you've got to try and build that early on, where you get that kind of culture or that trust early on. It's not really easy at times because so Jason, I share your sentiments and your frustration with the kids who are going to go to Virgin Active. You're never going to stop them from doing that. But if you can kind of prove to them, you've got to kind of prove to them your results are going to be there. And if you can prove your results before, maybe the Virgin Active trainer, then maybe you're winning.
Yeah, shot Drakes. It's really difficult to get that sort of relationship right. It is a bit of a finicky one, but I think something that we definitely learn with experience. Guys, so what I'll do is I will get the YouTube link up for the people that missed it. What I'm going to try and do is do a little document and highlight some of the points and send it out. But once again, thank you everyone for joining. If you guys can think of practical topics that you want to chat about, I know we had a few on the Google Sheet, but if you guys have topics you want to chat about in the upcoming episodes before the end of the year, please get in touch with me. And we look forward to moving on from here. Thanks guys for joining, and we will chat soon. Cheers.